cut down, and only a stump will be left. And so that dream is specifically about not just Babylon, but it's about Nebuchadnezzar himself. So that's the similarity. The statue is destroyed and the tree is cut down. And the idea here is that God, of course, is the one who intervenes in these civilizations, with these powerful individuals. I think the story is trying to tell us that we should not give overdue importance to people, despite the fact that they are important, or they might think they're important, because they are just human beings. And not only that, but they will have to give account to God. And I don't think that's just true 3,000 years ago or 2,000 ago. I think that's true today in our world. It's important to read the Bible that way and to understand that really God has not changed. I mean, he asks account of people, and even of important people, he asks account of what they do. I think it's very interesting, the idea of dreams. I've noticed that God sometimes in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, has given dreams to total unbelievers or to pagans. You would wonder why. You remember that Joseph, we know, was in prison, and the reason that he got freed from prison is because of a dream given to Pharaoh. Without that dream given to Pharaoh, Joseph would have stayed in prison. Well, who gave the dream to Pharaoh? Was it just coincidence, the dream? It just happened like that? No. God gave that dream because God wanted that Pharaoh to do something. Now, he wants us to do things, God. But what he does is he speaks to us through his word. And we have the same word for all of us. God doesn't basically ask us to change by giving us dreams. Now, he can give us dreams if he wants. I'm not saying he can't. But he doesn't do it basically like that. But with non-believers and pagans, they don't have faith in his word. They don't even have his word. Nebuchadnezzar didn't have the word of God. He didn't have a revelation from God. He was a pagan. So how is God going to speak to him? Well, through a dream. A dream so powerful, so significant that the guy he needs to know what this is about. You know, people dream all the time. But, you know, I mean, even I've had dreams a few that I wrote down because I thought these dreams had a very special significance. I still think today. Maybe 2 or 3, I would say 3 dreams I had in my life that I have seen in my life that they had actual significance in the history of my life and even of other things. But I want to talk about that. It's not about me. But he had a significant dream, and it shook him up. And you know the story. I mean, let's go to the dream maybe. So here, we're going to start at verse 10 just to see about this dream Nebuchadnezzar had, okay? The visions of my head as I lay in the bed were these. I saw, and behold, that's verse 10, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The statue also was great in the first dream. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Okay, that sounds pretty beautiful. Big tree, you know, great tree. You can see it from everywhere on the earth. That must be a pretty big tree. Its leaves were beautiful. Wow, nice dream. Its fruit abundant, and it was food for all. That's a nice dream. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of heaven lived in its branches. All flesh was fed from it. And then I saw the visions of my head as I lay in the bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said this, chop down the tree, and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. Wow, that's kind of shocking, you know. That tree seems so beautiful. It was so big. Nothing could bring it down. Whatever storm or it just would be there forever. These big old trees that you see, they think they've been there. I've seen trees that have been, in France, I've seen trees that were about 1,000 years old. A few, very big trees. There are trees like that. I think there are trees like that, is it in California? There. We went to the park there. They were pretty big, pretty old trees, over 1,000 years. I can't remember the name of that place. Sequoia, big old trees. But he says, leave the stump of its root in the earth, bound it with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts and the grass of the earth. So this tree is cut down, it's a stump, but suddenly the stump realizes it's not a tree, it's a person. It's a human being. But the human being is with the beasts. Let his portion be with the beasts and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, it's about a man. And let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. What is 7 periods of time? I think it's 7 years, and the reason I think that is that the Septuagint version, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament made around 270 BC in Alexandria, actually translated into Greek, this Hebrew, 7 years. The rabbis did that, so they must have thought that's about 7 years is the time. Josephus also writes about this dream and says also it's 7 years. In his History of the Jews, he talks about Nebuchadnezzar. We have the book here if you want to look at it. Says that that's 7 years. So 7 years, I would agree with that. So the sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the Holy One, the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. Oh, that's funny. I thought that God put over nations very wise, very strong, very nice looking, very rich, no, that can happen. He can put over a nation who he wants, even the craziest guy. Who knows? He might want to use him somehow. God knows. He can use this guy or this person. That's what he says. The dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Notice here that the spirit of the holy gods, again, the text uses in Hebrew Elohim, which is God. In fact, it should be translated the spirit of the holy God. The experts. The Sadducees are experts. Jesus says to them, you don't know the power of God in the scriptures. The Pharisees are experts of the law. And Jesus says, you are totally wrong. The scribes are experts of the law. You're wrong too. So, we got to be, we got to watch, because what did Jesus say about false prophets? Do they look like wolves? No. They look like sheep. They look good. They look righteous. They talk about God's love, God's righteousness, God's justice. We got to be really going a little deeper, about this kind of thing. We got to think. We got to be careful. But anyway, I'm going off the subject here, and we're not going to be able to finish if I continue like that. Something I wanted to share, some thoughts I had. Some thought that I had. Why does God give dreams to pagan people in this particular case? Why did God do this? There's several reasons. I found 4 that I want to mention, 4 reasons. First of all, this dream itself speaks clearly that God is in control. He's the real king and the real ruler. Nebuchadnezzar needed to know that. Obviously, he didn't know that. He thought he was the guy. In fact, his name was formed from the name of a god, and he was worshipped like a god. You remember Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was one of the gods of Egypt. He really thought he was a god. The Roman emperors, not all of them, but most of them thought they were gods, worshipped. When he entered the arena, during the gladiator games and all, everybody stood up and say, "Oh, Domitian, the great God of heaven, the beautiful God, the one who created everything." Oh, really? Domitian? Caligula? Nero? They thought they were gods. They wanted to be worshipped. Well, they're not gods. And so God here is teaching a lesson, number one, about that. Secondly, what is God doing? The Jews, the Israelites, the descendants of Abraham, are the ones that God made a promise to. If God's plan is going to be realized, these Israelites in Babylon, in exile, they need protection. They need to be protected. God needs to preserve them. And I believe that's one of the ways, many other ways, that God preserved his people in Babylon. Because notice this, Daniel and his friends first are put in a position of authority. Well, that's already pretty good. But only he is able to explain the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, and that gives credibility to Daniel, Belshazzar here. That gives credibility to the God of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar's got to be careful. Maybe these people, maybe there's a God over them that can protect them. Maybe I better be careful. Well, maybe this story is true, and if it's me, the tree, and I'm the stump, I don't want to hear that. In fact, that's why at first he doesn't ask Daniel to interpret. He don't want to hear the truth. If it was him, he doesn't like to hear that, but it is him. So it's a protection device for God to give dreams to these rulers so that God's people, the Israelites, might be preserved. And you know what I think? God does the same today. God has a people today. He has a truth to be preserved. You know, for centuries, people tried to burn and destroy the Bible. You would think that's weird, because they thought the Bible could only exist in one language, Latin. If anybody translated that Bible in another language, they would be killed, they would be burned. When Luther did his translation of the Bible, he had to hide, and nobody knew where he was, in a castle. If they had found him, they would kill him. They did not want the Bible to be in people's hands. They could read it in their language. Wow. Well, God did things. God did things politically in history so that his will could be accomplished. So that at some point here, there would still be Israelites. You know the story of Esther. But that's not the only case. Because we have to realize that the descendants of Abraham were threatened constantly. And we think that the church was not threatened throughout history, Christianity, all the time. How many efforts to try and destroy the Bible, to try and destroy Christianity, to try also and destroy the teachings? That's another way. What about destruction of Christian morality? That would be a pretty big deal if we could just get all Christians to live immorally. Wouldn't that be great? That would destroy Christianity. Because that's a big part of Christianity. Well, there's other things, other areas. For many centuries, the teachings of Arius, who rose up pretty early in Christianity, permeated all of the Christendom for a long time. And what was his teaching? Jesus was not divine at all. He was not the Son of God. He was just a regular person, or maybe an angel. Well, that teaching would have destroyed Christianity, the basic faith. So all kinds of things like that. All the time, when you study church history, when you study that, you realize how difficult the situation of Christianity was all the time. Why do you think that's the case? Is that just chance, it just happened like that? Oh, well, Christians had a hard time, Christianity, the Bible was almost destroyed for many centuries. Why do you think that happened? What's going on here? Anyone? Yeah, exactly. There's somebody who doesn't like it. There's somebody who doesn't like that Christian faith. The book of Revelation is all about that. It's all about the persecution of Christians, mainly under the Roman Empire. But here I think there's a protection device by God. Because you see, that really helped the Israelites, that helped the descendants of Abraham have credibility there in that nation and be protected even by that king. I think also this shows the influence. This story shows the influence of a few godly people in another nation. They're not in their own home, and they're among these pagans. But look, just a few people. There was others, But look how just a few. Let's just take Daniel and his 3 friends. How the big impact they had, even though they were not. It seems they were not millions, but they were just a few. And Jesus called that what? Being the salt. Now, I like salt, but I don't like when accidentally I pour. Have you done that? You pour the whole salt thing. Whatever you call that, salt shaker. I forget my words. You pour the whole shaker in your meal. Are you going to eat it? No, I just want a little bit. So you don't need a lot. That's the whole idea. Isn't that beautiful? But even a little bit, the adversary does not necessarily like. So, we have the interpretation of the dream. That's what we're going to look at in chapter 4 and verses 19 through 27. It's not hard to understand because he explains to him, and we could begin even in verse 23 because we don't have all the time we want. Verse 23, because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its root on the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, and the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts of the field till 7 period of times has passed over him. Here's the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High. We're coming to somewhere here. Which has come upon my lord the king, a decree of the Most High. So, there's nobody higher. It's even beyond God here. It's even more than Elohim, the creator, the God creator. This is the Most High, the most powerful, the El Shaddai, the God above everything. Here's the interpretation. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man and gives it to whom he will. Now, we know, we live in democracy, we believe, and it's a good system. I think it's great. It's wonderful to live in a democracy, but we should still believe, democracy or not, we still believe that it is God who puts people in position where they are for a reason that he has. Sometimes we don't understand, actually. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, I like this is an amazing part. Let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may be perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity or tranquility in some translations. The courage of Daniel, and there's another reason actually of this story is, well, I would say, it gave an opportunity to this pagan king to hear some truth. And God is showing us that whoever is in high position, nobody is too high, too big, too wealthy, too important, not to hear the gospel. So we shouldn't be impressed by those titles or by anything like that. Person needs to repent, they need to repent. Because they're going to be judged by God anyway, by Christ anyway. So it happened to him, and we know how it happened, and it tells us at the end exactly what happened. The dream was realized. He was walking, it says, on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, and he says, oh, is not this great Babylon which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence for the glory of my majesty? And the gardens of Babylon were known at the time in antiquity by everyone in the world. You know what the gardens of Babylon were? They're very interesting. Nebuchadnezzar's wife had grown up in the mountains. She missed the mountains. And she complained about that. And one day Nebuchadnezzar did what every husband does. He satisfied her complaint. He built mountains for her. He did. But you know what the mountains were? They were terraces, very, very high terraces. Hundreds of feet high with trees. And she could walk up there and think she was in the mountains. And that was the gardens of Babylon. It was absolutely amazing what they were able to do architecturally with the trees. It was an incredible thing. There's nothing like this on earth today that exists with all the modern technology. And so you think, the guy, Nebuchadnezzar was able to do amazing things, constructions and things like that. And that's not the only thing. There were a lot of things he was able to do. That would be nice to watch pictures of things like that, and just see. And so I think that he really felt, that he had done something absolutely magnificent. And he did. He did. But what is the problem when people are successful in life? What can be a problem they can have? Yeah. They can become too humble. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Sorry. I thought so. They can become proud. There's a risk. There's a danger. Even to the point, in fact, that they might say, well, there's no God at all. That gets worse. Now, if they say there's God, maybe they have a little chance of, maybe, I don't know. I'm not being too proud, but not even there. Because it doesn't prove anything. Words don't prove anything. So anyway, so immediately he is driven from the human beings and becomes like an animal. There's all kinds of theories of whether that sort of thing can happen. There are diseases, I know, where people think they're chickens, and things like that, and it happens, some maniac things, we read that in his book, Psychiatry and Psychology. I don't know if there's anything, but it's something from God, obviously, here, and it's for a specific period of time. So at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. Notice, he lifts his eyes to heaven, and that's when his reason comes back to him. Maybe that's when he started getting a little more wise. And I bless the Most High, and praise and honor him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. He does according to his will among the hosts of heaven, among the inhabitants of the earth. None can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? Most commentators, most modern commentators will say, if you read them, that this is a fable. It never happened. And here's a proof they will give to you for that. They will say, you can read all the history of the Babylonians, and they wrote their history very precisely. You will never find this story. And to them, that's a proof. They don't know human nature, and they don't know history very well. I don't know of any civilization that has written negative stuff about their own rulers and their own history. Usually it's always good. No? That's human nature. I think only the Bible actually tells of a people who did a lot of mistakes and actually writes about it. But you won't find in Egypt anything written about the Pharaoh being drowned in the Red Sea or resisting, the plagues of Egypt. Again, that's a proof that didn't happen? Come on. You don't know human nature. No. The fact that they're not going to write about this kind of stuff that happened to him. Certainly not. So I wanted to say that because I thought that's funny how they reason, these non-believers who are experts of the Bible. There's a lot of them. Okay, well, I have gone very fast. I thought I needed more time, you see, John. But I was faster probably than normal.
Keep reading. I have one question for you.
Yes.
That part you were reading, it's kind of like indented over, like it's a song?
Yeah, it's written like that. And the reason it's written like that is the editors, the translators, do that in order to give the impression that it's a fable, that it's a song, that it's not a real thing that happened historically.
But then after that,
Yeah.
in verse 36, it says at the same time, my
Yes.
reason returned to me.
Yeah.
And it repeats some of the same things you just read.
He does. That's right. You're right. It repeats the same things.
But then at the very end,
Yeah.
Like that part where it says,
Yeah.
I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King
Right.
of heaven, for all the books are
Uh-huh.
writing. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because a man like that saying something like that, they say that's unbelievable. It's a fable. And they love to say that all these things in the Old Testament, where God intervenes, are fables. I mean, even the deliverance of Egypt, that's a myth. The creation, that never happened. All these miracles, you mean the miracles of Jesus? Those are made up stuff, These are myth. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 Archaeology, Rita is right. Archaeology will sometimes really go against those ideas and say, oh, well, there's an artifact. Like I say, they did find very ancient, these wheels of the chariots. They did find them. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. Everything, nothing like that existed. Yes. Yes. Yeah, has been discovered, yes, a long time ago, actually. But all of that, you're right. But, yeah, very little. Archaeology is one of the areas where we really see how, along the centuries, we discover more and more. The more we go and the more we discover these artifacts and these things, these writings, these stones, all these things that describe the same things that the Bible describes. But as long as there's not a proof outside of the Bible, the skeptics and the theologians and people like that will say, well, that must not be true. Now, if we have something outside the Bible that says, then it could be true. Which means what? Well, it means that the Bible, you don't take it for true, but you take everything else for true. It's kind of a strange way of looking at the Bible. It's a document, that they just don't want to give too much importance, too much validity, because I think they have a problem with faith. But the thing is that the Bible asserts itself as true. And that already is important, because a lot of the mythology and fables that we read, like whatever it's, even Homer, all these guys, when they were writing that, they knew they were writing fables. They call it mythology, myth. They didn't say this is really what happened. Now, Herodotus wrote a history. He was a historian, but he wrote history. Now, some of the things he put some things in there, but still, he believed he wrote history, so did others. But most of the time, if they wrote fables, it was for fun. It was just fiction, like we call science fiction. That was what it was. But the Bible is not written as science fiction. So the reason is a good question. The reason they put that in brackets like that, the modern editors, is because they have the presumption, they have the idea that, well, this is probably just a song of poetry. It couldn't be true. So by putting it like that, that's what happens. It gives that impression. Not too good. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.